The last thought you had before you fell asleep last night was not about tomorrow. It was about something that has already happened, something someone said or did not say, something you did or did not do, and you turned it over quietly in the dark, the way a stone is turned over and over in a river, until you finally drifted off without ever setting it down. You know this is true. You have done it 1,000 times. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is that moment, not the event that started it, not the person involved, if there was a person, but that specific habit, the habit of lying down at the end of the day and handing the last hours of your consciousness over to doubt, to review, to the quiet, relentless rehearsal of everything that might be wrong. Because here is what most people do not understand about that moment. That quiet space just before sleep, that soft, drifting, half-aware state where the body is still and the mind begins to loosen, that is not an ordinary moment. That is, in fact, the most powerful moment of your entire day. And most people spend it in a way that costs them more than they know. I want to begin there, not with a technique, not with a practice. I want to begin with what is actually happening in that moment, so that when we arrive at the practical, you will understand why it works the way it does. You are made of two parts, not body and soul, though that framing is not wrong. I mean something more immediate than that. You are made of the part of you that thinks, and the part of you that accepts, the part that questions, and the part that simply receives and acts on what it is given. The conscious mind and the deeper mind beneath it. Most of the day, the conscious mind is loud. It argues, it doubts, it filters, it says yes but, and what if, and I am not sure. It is busy and it is useful, but it is also a wall. It stands between you and the deeper part of yourself that simply creates, that takes whatever it is given and begins to build it into the fabric of your experience. Now, when you lie down at night and that conscious mind begins to grow quiet, when the noise of the day falls away and you begin to drift, the wall becomes thin. And whatever passes through that thinning wall in those final minutes goes down into the deeper mind, unchallenged, unopposed, and completely accepted. Not as a wish, not as a hope, as a fact, as an instruction, as a direction. This is why the ancients spoke so carefully about what a man thinks upon as he falls asleep. They were not speaking poetically. They were describing something they had observed in themselves, observed in others. What you carry into sleep, you carry into the world that greets you when you wake. And so when you lie down and rehearse the self-doubt, when you replay the conversation that did not go well, the decision you are not sure about, the version of yourself you are afraid might be the real one, you are not simply venting, not simply processing. You are planted. You are telling the deepest part of your own nature. This is the truth of me. This uncertainty, this inadequacy, this unresolved question. This is what I am. And the deeper mind, which does not argue, which does not say yes, but it simply says, very well. And it goes to work. Now, I am not telling you this to alarm you. I am telling you this because once you truly see the mechanism, it loses its power over you. You cannot be frightened of something you fully understand. And once you understand what is happening in those nighttime hours, you will naturally, not through discipline, not through effort, you will naturally want to use them differently. Let me describe the habit more precisely, so you know exactly what I mean. The habit of self-doubt at night does not always announce itself clearly. It does not always arrive as a loud, panicked voice. More often it is quiet, almost reasonable. It says things like, I wonder if I handled that correctly, or there is something about me that people eventually notice and pull away from, or I always do this. I always get to a certain point and then something in me seems to stop. These are not dramatic thoughts. They feel like honest reflection. They feel like self-awareness. And that is precisely why they are so easy to overlook. But notice what each of those thoughts has in common. Each one is a statement about a self that is fixed, limited, repeating. Each one says in some form, this is who I am and it is not enough. And each one, carried into that soft border of sleep, is received as gospel by the part of you that simply accepts without question. This is the mistake. Not a moral mistake, not a failure of character, simply a misdirection. A habit that formed without your realizing it, probably long ago, perhaps in childhood when you first learned to review your behavior before sleep, to ask yourself whether you have been good enough that day. It was not a bad intention, but it has become over time a groove, a worn path, and the mind, like water, follows the path of least resistance. The teaching I want to offer you tonight is not a new path. It is simply a gentle redirection onto the path that was always yours. Here is the core of it, and I want to say it plainly before we go deeper into it. The state in which you fall asleep is the state you wake into, not metaphorically, literally. The feeling that carries you across the threshold of sleep is the feeling that greets you on the other side. And the feeling that greets you in the morning is the feeling that colors the day. Which means that the man or woman who falls asleep in a state of quiet certainty, not excitement, not hope, not pleading, but certainty, that settled, restful knowing, that person wakes into a day that confirms their certainty. And the person who falls asleep rehearsing their doubt wakes into a day that confirms those doubts. Not because the world is punishing them, but because they have instructed the deepest creative part of their own nature, and it has obeyed. This is not complicated. It is in fact profoundly simple. The difficulty is not intellectual. The difficulty is this. Doubt feels honest. It feels responsible. It feels like you are not lying to yourself, not pretending, not wearing a mask. And certainty, that quiet, resting certainty about yourself, feels at first like something you have not earned, like something you are not entitled to. I want to speak directly to that feeling because it will arise. When you first attempt to lie down at night and simply rest in the feeling that you are enough, that you are at your core, someone whose life works, someone who is loved, someone who moves through the world with a quiet, natural confidence, the conscious mind will immediately object. It will say, but you have not done anything to deserve that feeling. It will point to evidence of the times things did not work, the times you were uncertain, the times you fell short of who you wanted to be. And here is what I want you to understand about that objection. It is not wrong exactly. It is simply looking at the wrong thing. It is looking at the record of the past, which was itself created by exactly the same mechanism, by the states you carried into sleep in all those previous nights. It is circular. The doubt creates experiences that justify the doubt. And the only way to interrupt the circle is not to argue with the evidence, but to simply change what you carry into sleep. You do not need to believe it completely at first. You do not need to feel certain from the beginning. You only need to be willing to let the feeling of certainty be present as you fall asleep. Just willing, just open. That is enough to begin. Now I want to take you through what this actually feels like, so that it is not abstract. I want you to come with me into this experience. Imagine yourself at the end of an ordinary day. The day is done. Whatever happened in it has happened. You are lying down. The room is quiet. And instead of beginning the review, instead of replaying, rehearsing, questioning, you simply stop. You become still. And you ask yourself one question. Not a difficult question, not a question that requires analysis. You ask, what would it feel like if I already knew that I was all right? Not that things would work out. Not that something you want would arrive. Simply, what would it feel like to know that you yourself, the person lying here in this quiet room, are fundamentally all right? Not broken, not insufficient, not behind where you should be, simply all right. Let that question sit. Do not force an answer. Do not manufacture a feeling. Simply hold the question gently and let the feeling arise on its own. What you will notice when you are truly still is that the feeling is not far away. It is not something you must climb toward or construct. It is more like something that was already there, underneath the noise of the day, waiting for the noise to stop. A kind of quiet, a kind of ease. The body slightly softening. The breath flowing without effort. A gentle sense of not happiness exactly, but okayness. A sense that you are here, you are real, and in this moment nothing is actually wrong. Stay there. When the doubtful thoughts arise, and they will arise, do not fight them. Do not argue with them. Simply notice them the way you would notice a sound from outside the window. And then return. Return to that quiet feeling of being all right. Return to the stillness. Return to the body. Return to the breath. Not because you are suppressing something, but because you are simply choosing where to rest your attention before you cross over into sleep. This is the technique. It is not a complicated one. You are not reciting affirmations. You are not constructing an elaborate imagined scene. You are simply, in that most powerful of all moments, choosing to rest in a feeling of quiet self-acceptance rather than quiet self-examination. Now let me speak to the doubt that will arise around us, because there are several forms it takes. The first form it takes is this. I need to review the day in order to improve. If I stop examining myself, I will stop growing. This is a sincere concern and it deserves a sincere answer. The examination of the day has its place. It belongs in the earlier hours of the evening, at dinner, in conversation, in your own journal if you keep one. By the time you are lying down, the work of the conscious mind is done. Reviewing the day again in the last minutes before sleep does not produce insight. It produces repetition. It is not growth. It is a loop. And ending that loop does not diminish your ability to learn from your life. It actually enhances it, because a mind that rests in certainty wakes with more clarity than a mind that rests in unresolved tension. The second form doubt takes is this. I cannot simply decide to feel all right when things in my life are genuinely difficult. And to this I would say, I am not asking you to feel all right about the circumstances. The circumstances will shift on their own as the inner state shifts. I am asking you to feel all right about yourself. These are not the same thing. A circumstance is something outside of you. Your fundamental nature is something inside of you. And the part of you that is capable of creating, of changing, of moving through difficulty with grace, that part is not broken. It has never been broken. It may have been covered over, quieted, talked out of itself by years of nighttime doubt. But it is there, and it does not require the circumstances to improve before it is allowed to rest. The third form of doubt is the most subtle. It sounds like this. I have tried things before and they did not work. And underneath that thought is a deeper one. Perhaps I am someone for whom things do not work. This is the most important one to address, because it is not really a thought about a technique. It is a thought about identity. And identity is precisely what shifts in those moments before sleep. When you carry I am someone for whom things do not work into sleep, the deeper mind accepts it and builds accordingly. When you carry I am someone who is fundamentally all right, who moves through life with an ease I may not always see, but which is always operating, even that sentence, held loosely, carried gently across the border of sleep. The deeper mind accepts that instead, and it builds accordingly. You do not have to say those words. You do not have to think any particular thought. You only need to find the feeling of being, simply all right. The practical instruction for tonight, and for every night, is this. When you lie down, give yourself a few minutes, it will not take long, to do nothing except be still. Let the day's thoughts arrive and pass. Do not hold any of them. And when the drift begins, when the edges of the conscious mind begin to soften, Place your attention gently on the feeling of ease in your body, on the quiet, on the simple fact of rest. And if you can find it, even faintly, even for only a moment, find the feeling of being someone who is all right. Not someone whose problems are solved, not someone whose life is perfect, simply someone who at the core is intact, is enough, is in this moment exactly where they are supposed to be. That is all. Let that be the last thing the deeper mind receives from you tonight, and observe over the coming days and weeks what begins to change in the texture of your days, not because something outside of you has changed, but because you have changed the instruction. You have changed what you tell the most obedient part of your own nature every single night. It will not happen all at once. Old habits have weight to them. You will some nights find yourself halfway through the old review before you remember. That is fine. Simply return. Each time you return, the returning becomes easier. Each night that you rest in certainty rather than doubt, the certainty deepens. And the doubting thoughts, which were never really yours, which were borrowed from an old story that was never the whole truth, begin quietly and without drama to lose their hold. This is a patient work, but it is not a difficult one. It asks nothing of you but a willingness to rest. And I think if you are honest with yourself, you are ready for that. I think you have been ready for it for a very long time. You were not made to lie down every night and rehearse your insufficiency. That was never the design. You were made to rest, to let go, to cross into sleep the way a child crosses into sleep, without unfinished business, without unpaid debts to yourself, with nothing carried except the simple and complete certainty that you are held and you are whole and tomorrow is already taken care of. Let tonight be the beginning of that. Not a dramatic beginning, not a resolved, triumphant beginning, just a quiet one. Just you in a still room choosing, perhaps for the first time in a long time, to be on your own side as you fall asleep. That is enough. That has always been enough. That's it for this video, my friends, and I'll see you next time.